Welcome to the Frequency Labyrinth. I am Adrienne McDonald, your host. This podcast is for you if you're done with surface level self-help and ready for something deeper and actually transformative. Around here, we work with ancient wisdom, human design, gene keys, and shamanic practices, not as knowledge to collect, but as tools to live by. This isn't about one size fits all. It's about learning to work with your energy, your design, and your life. This is about integration and embodiment. We go deep here with ancient wisdom, practical integration, so that you can develop ironclad self-trust. Let's get into it. Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome back. Happy Halloween if you celebrate. Today we are going to be talking about the November energy mix. I'm going to go through some of the cosmic astrology mix and also each of the human design gate transits for the sun. So let's get into it. I feel like October wasn't fallout, it was integration. Eclipse season pulled a lot to the surface in September, and the past weeks have been about, letting that land, the body catching up to what the energy's been trying to say. And here comes November, stirring the water again with emotional revealing and just... It also feels unpredictable enough to keep us on our toes. It's a mix of catharsis and clarity that changes how you may want to move forward. We were forming a Grand Water Trine towards the end of this month in October, and that energy will continue into November. It may feel like that you're standing knee-deep in your emotions while Uranus throws lightning bolts at your plans. Not trying to scare you, just saying it may be a little bit unpredictable because I do feel like this is a very Uranian type vibe month. Mars is kicking things off in Sagittarius, adding fire to the sky. It's already, crackling with the tension, if you will. And between the full moon in Taurus on the 5th and the Mercury retrograde, it's going to be interesting with this Grand Water Trine being constantly activated, pulling us back into our feelings. But again, it's not here to drown us, it's here to clear us, right? This month is all about the dance between electricity and emotion, between flashes of insight and maybe waves of feeling. And I don't feel like the question is to how to stay calm, although we would like to. It's how do you stay conscious while everything is shifting? And that's what we'll be unpacking in this episode. So the gates that will be lit up by the sun in November are 44, 1, 43, 14, 24, and 9. And we'll explore how each one of those reveals another layer of power and creativity and focus. And let's zoom out and talk about the larger energetic weather that's shaping November. So if I had to give this maybe an archetypal title, this month feels like a conversation between the trickster and the alchemist, the Uranus and the Grand Water Trine. And the trickster with Uranus is stirring in Taurus because it is now retrograde back into Taurus, shaking up the places where we've grown too comfortable, too attached, too certain. And it's not chaos for the sake of chaos. It's the tension that invites us to think about things differently, be a little bit more innovative. This is not the first time that Uranus has been in this chart. Part of your chart. It was there for quite some time, but during the retrograde, it's revisiting some things that maybe you thought were put to bed, but are not necessarily put to bed. Uranus likes to pull the rug out from under you sometimes, and this month, November, Uranus will be opposing Mars, Mercury, I think, and Venus at different points. So it's going to be giving us different perspectives, confronting us about how we think about things, how we relate, just your average basic entire circuitry of being human. And meanwhile, the alchemist is working through the Grand Water Trine, an element current running through Cancer and Scorpio and Pisces all month long. And water in astrology is, I think of it as emotional intelligence. It's the feeling function that Jung said that connects us to our soul. And the alchemist's work is never precisely clean. It's more... I feel like most of the time we don't want to throw everything out. It's more dissolving what's not working and then composting and something else forming in its place. So because it is going to be such a watery month, I feel like this is a good opportunity to really dissolve anything rigid and be more fluid. And we're going to start with Mars moving into Sagittarius on November 4th, which is ignition energy, truth in motion. Mars here says, what are you fighting for that actually matters? It's sort of continuing that what's worth it energy from October. Then the full moon in Taurus on November 5th is going to really highlight, I think, embodiment. It's the, Taurus is all about sensuality and stability. It's that grounding force. So, if Uranus has an influence here, it might reveal where we've tried to build our peace on shaky ground, because Taurus wants grounded pleasure. Uranus wants freedom. So if you've been forcing comfort where growth is needed, this full moon might make that a little bit more visible. Then we have a Mercury retrograde. We're already in the shadow right now. Retrogrades back from Mercury's in Sagittarius right now. It's going to retrograde back into Scorpio. That retrograde starts on November 9th and it goes through the 29th. But we will either be in retrograde or in the shadow in November. So, prep for those tech issues. So, there's an opportunity for pattern recognition here, though. Don't overanalyze every emotion, but just maybe be mindful about what keeps circling back, because we're asking for integration, not necessarily punishment. Now, Jupiter retrograde in Cancer starts on November 11th, and this I feel like is going to amplify emotional wisdom. It's that capacity it's the capacity to nurture without necessarily self-sacrifice. It's that generous teacher reminding us that empathy without boundaries becomes martyrdom. And I think that through this, with all of this water, I think we have an opportunity to look at things of, okay, as I said last month, the season that we're in is a lot of reciprocity type energy. And then we have the new moon in Scorpio on the 20th, which feels very like an initiation type vibe to me, almost like a descent into the underworld before renewal. It's, Persephone season vibes and a lot of behind the scene type of things going on there, which I'll say more about later in the month. And then finally, Saturn stations direct in Pisces on November 7th, which is crystallizing all this emotional processing into discernment. Saturn in Pisces is likely to help us learn to build structure out of fog. It takes imagination and faith, but it's a kind of maturity that it's not there to kill the magic, but it's here to refine it. And that, again, this is all about refinement. The psyche is distilling what's essential, what's the interplay between Uranus and the water trine, and I feel like that's the experiment. Can we hold the paradox, freedom and feeling, disruption and depth, without, going to the extremes of everything, despite the media pushing everything to extremes sometimes, I feel like. And I feel like that's the real alchemy of November. And you can feel the same tension, the freedom and feeling and the clarity through chaos, pulsing through the sun transits of the human design gates this month. The gates are like, archetypal signatures of what's going on in the background. So let us get into that. Okay, so we end October in Gate 44, the Gate of Alertness, and it's the gene keys of interference, teamwork, and synergy. And this is instinctual awareness. It's the part of us that scans for patterns, both ancestral and personal. In its shadow, it's hypervigilance, that feeling that you have to manage every variable to stay safe. Jung might call this the realm of the complex, the unconscious material surfacing through relationship patterns. But the gift here is teamwork. And it's recognizing that what we call interference is maybe patterns that were trying to protect us in the past. And when we become conscious of that, we can figure out what we need to stop fighting and what we can start embracing, right? And that, evolution, and I believe this from a collective standpoint, evolution really happens through connection, not control. And when we think about Uranus shaking up, Mars and in Sagittarius, the Gate 44 might be asking, like, where am I replaying the past instead of what's responding in the present? Sometimes when we've been through a lot of crap, we continue to expect that. And there's some validity to that. And I was talking to someone recently, and they said, well, how do I break this pattern? And from a mindset standpoint, it's you have to have new experiences so that you can operate from a different paradigm. But in the interim of getting to those new experiences, there's a bit of a walk of faith. And I feel like leaning on your spiritual practices is the best bridge to getting to those new experiences. So when Gate 44 is active, it's really about healing through resonance, right? And finding what works for you and in the groups that you still feel connected to, because they probably have changed over the past, say, in 2025. Now, as the sun moves from Gate 44 into Gate 1, we cross the threshold into the Quarter of Mutation. And that's the final quarter of the human design year and the season of transformation. Everything that's been relational, ancestral, or pattern-based begins to internalize and evolve. And the Quarter of Duality teaches us that, or taught us, I should say, because we're wrapping that up, how energy moves through people. The Quarter of Mutation asks how that awareness changes us personally. And it's ruled by the pulse of the root. Mutation that rises from pressure, and its tone sort of gives you creative renewal vibes. And this is where instinct turns into inspiration, and the Uranian energy that we'll be experiencing in November, it's really going to ignite some sort of individual growth, and the water trine is going to give it more emotional depth. And I feel like together they're translating everything that we've integrated in since eclipse season into something new, into something, a different expression of it, born from, like, coming out of more lived experience and embodiment. So when the gate on the 6th, the sun moves into gate 1, and that is the energy of gate self-expression. And the gene key is entropy, and gift is freshness, and the city is beauty. And, after all that collective work, all that relational work, gate 1 is really deeply personal. It's the what wants to come through me. But at the shadow, it can feel like burnout. That flat gray space where nothing feels inspired. But, you can think of that space also. You can use that energy for composting. It could be that stillness that precedes some sort of creative expression. And I think that because we're having a Mercury retrograde during some of this period, or at least be in the shadow, we're invited to turn inward, to listen beneath the noise for whatever creative current that's uniquely yours, that, the courage to do things in your own way. And, in union terms, this is individuation through art, the self-expression through color and sound and words or movement. And beauty here is not necessarily decoration. It's more about coherence, when the inner and outer world match. And you might want to ask yourself, what part of me has been waiting for permission to create? And to create for the sake of creation, not necessarily for some productivity exercise, right? Are you willing to let inspiration move through you without trying to brand it or monetize it or perfect it in any way? And then on November 12th, we move into the gate 43, which is the gate of insight. And the gene key's shadow here is deafness, and the gift is insight, and the city is epiphany. And I feel like this is Uranian energy at its finest. The sudden downloads, the lightning clarity, the ideas that don't fit necessarily into an existing paradigm. The shadow here is deafness. Not an inability to hear necessarily, but the refusal to listen to what may not make quite the sense yet. We live in a world that worships logic, and gate 43 speaks in symbols and intuition. And Jung would say this is where the unconscious breaks through the rational mind, and insight arrives when you make space for silence, for stillness. And during this transit with Uranus in these oppositions to perhaps Mars and Mercury, you can expect flashes of understanding that may rearrange your worldview. You don't have to explain them. You can put them in. They can incubate for a little while. That epiphany may come when your logical mind, your intellect, relaxes enough for a different kind of truth to surface. And maybe a reflection for this gate is, where am I dismissing inner knowing because it's inconvenient? A lot of times we do that, is we dismiss our little internal nudges. And what if that weird idea that won't leave you alone is actually divine intelligence in disguise? So, and gate 43 also reminds us that wisdom doesn't always want to announce itself politely. Sometimes it kicks that door in, gives us a little butt kick. And that's exactly what we need to break the spell of whatever we were under in that old paradigm or that old way of thinking. So then we move into gate 14 on the 17th. And this is the gate of power skills. And its gene key shadow is compromise, and the gift is competence, and the City is bounteousness. I always have trouble saying that word. And this gate always lands right when the collective starts asking, like, how do I actually live what I know? After the insight of Gate 43, this is really about embodiment. This is about turning insight and revelation into like manifestation of action, right? And the shadow frequency compromise isn't about healthy negotiation. It's that giving the power away, trading vitality for approval, if you will. And you can feel that in your body. It's that dull, it's different than burnout. I feel like it's a dull type of exhaustion that comes from doing what's correct or smart instead of what's true. And union language is the bargaining with the false self, if you will. It's that mask that keeps you safe, but like really slowly drains your spirit. And as we approach the new moon in Scorpio on November 20th, Gate 14 is asking for a recalibration of power. And remember, in the summer, I talked about you'll have a different type of relationship with power over the summer. You recalibrated your relationship with power. And now this is really coming to the forefront of, I'm looking at that differently, right? Scorpio season digs under the surface to expose things, and this new moon wants a different kind of renewal. It's a stop outsourcing your magic type of vibe, all right? It's the awareness of sacred responsibility, like knowing what your resources are, knowing what your talents are, knowing what your limits are, and choosing where to place your energy with a bit more precision. I think that's what we're coming out of, or is going to be coming through in November. And, I think that you can ask yourself, what am I giving my life force to that doesn't light me up anymore? And where does saying no open the door to perhaps a more generous yes? Okay. If Gate 43 was a download, Gate 14 is the integration. It's where power stops being the idea and starts becoming your daily choices, your creative discipline, your willingness to align action with your soul. Then on November 23rd, we move into Gate 34, which is the Gate of Power. And the gene key shadow is force, and the gift is strength, and the city is majesty. Now, this isn't about controlling outcomes. Remember, this is about embodiment. After the insight and the resource themes earlier in the month, Gate 34 brings the reminder that power lives in coherence and presence, not push. At the shadow level, force is the compulsion to make something happen by either manipulation or maybe even before it's ready. It's the mind trying to run the body. But when you let power move through you instead of necessarily from you, it can become strength. It becomes a response that's grounded and alive. And with Saturn preparing to station direct in Pisces, I feel like this gate is really testing our relationship to energy itself. Can we channel power without gripping it? And the Citic state, the city is majesty, which is that quiet authority that doesn't need to prove power to anyone because it is power. Then that's where clarity becomes action, truth embodied through movement, through creation, through choice. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. It just is. And then finally, the sun moves into Gate 9, which is the gate of, the official name is the energy of details. And the Gate 9's shadow is inertia, and the gift is determination, and the city is invisibility. And I feel like after all that emotional, energetic unraveling, this gate may feel like a little bit like landing gear, and it narrows the focus where we can channel what we've learned from into form. And the shadow inertia may not necessarily be laziness. I feel like it's more like mental or psychic fatigue. After deep transformation, the system needs rest. Integration requires stillness and rest. But when determination rises, it's like a quiet consistency. It's not the hustle and bustle and the grind all day. That's not what true, I feel like, healthy determination is. It's the kind of focus that comes from a more of a want to and more of a commitment, and not just push and struggle and I'm going to be disciplined here. That's not the vibe that this gate gives. And as Saturn is anchored into Pisces, Gate 9 teaches that small, repeated actions sometimes are the magic. And invincibility, the city, isn't about never failing. It's about the rhythm of returning, right? It's about appreciating all the cycles. Jung called this the process of individuation, which is circling the same things and the same themes until they become fully integrated. Healing happens in a circle. You're always going to find a new layer, and that's okay, right? With this gate, I would ask, where can you simplify without shrinking? What one thing done with a really focused intention could be the game changer? And Gate 9 closes out November with that soft kind of power. Not with the fireworks necessarily, but like with that steady, consistent intention. That it's the tending of the fire that you've built. Perhaps after a little bit of a storm. So when we look at all the gates, we see a pattern running through it. It's evolution through coherence, through resonance. And we start seeing the pattern. We express, we receive insight, we act, we integrate, we focus, emotion and electricity, intuition and intellect, learning to hold both without splitting off to extremes. I feel like the theme of November is cathartic wisdom. And it's not the kind that you can highlight in a self-help book. It's the kind that you figure it out when life gets super real and you're really honest with yourself. And it's raw and it's uncomfortable, and it usually shows up right after you said, I am so done with this. I am so fucking done with this. With like all the watery and Uranian energy, November has, I think, is going to have a way of pulling truth to the surface. And sometimes that's going to be through conversations. Sometimes that's going to be through perhaps something breaking down. Sometimes in the quiet and in the stillness. Sometimes both. Sometimes all of it. I feel like it's going to be really emotional, but also super clarifying. So give yourself grace and space for that. And feel into what's happening, because that's going to be really important in November, is to feel into what's happening so you can start really tapping into what's real for you and what's coherent for you. And that's the wisdom piece. Awareness comes from experience, not necessarily theory. You start to notice the pattern, the insight follows the release. Every time you let something go, something clearer moves in. And that's what I mean by cathartic wisdom. It's the kind that rewires you from the inside out. So the gates this month are walking through that same process in real time. And together they're teaching us one thing. Evolution doesn't necessarily have to be loud. It can be. But it is consistent, right? It's a quiet decision to stay conscious while everything else rearranges itself. And letting the need to control or know everything in that moment, right? It's the kind of month that's going to ask you to stay in the room with yourself long enough for clarity to arrive. So, that's what I have for you today. I'll be going through different parts as the energy changes throughout the month. We've got some other special interview guests coming on the podcast. Some of my shamanic practitioner group friends have had some conversations with me that I think you will find interesting as we continue our Build Out Your Spiritual Team Structure series. And as always, if you find this helpful, please share it out. I would appreciate it. And if you want to understand how your energy is moving through your design, how your chart processes change, what your gifts are, you can grab your Human Design Energetic Blueprint. That link is in the show notes. If you would like to go deeper and schedule a session, that link is also in the show notes. And as always, remember to find beauty every day and seek the magic in the mundane. Thanks for tuning in today. As always, take what resonates, leave the rest. Let whatever landed move through you in whatever way it needs to or wants to. And also, if you want to explore more, you'll find more information in the show notes. If this episode stirred something in you, please share it out or leave a quick review. It helps so much and I really appreciate it. And remember, this work is about integration and it always starts with self-trust.